Welcome, everybody, to Trainers Warehouse Show and Share. I'm Sue Landay, and I'm joined with Chad Littlefield, who is going to talk to us today about his connection toolkit and his We Connect cards, which Trainers Warehouse has been selling probably for like 7 or 8 years, we're figuring. Chad has been working on developing these ideas about using questions and in his coaching, in his speaking engagements. He's a frequent keynote speaker. He's spoken at TEDx, probably forgetting a lot of different places where he's done that, and has consulted with companies ranging from Crayola to the CIA. He was up late last night because in the middle of the night because he has 2 little kids, 1 and 4. And so we're happy to have you here with all of your energy. And thank you. I'll leave it to you.
Yeah. Well, I'm still on, it's still 12 p.m. Eastern time. I'm based in Pittsburgh. So I'm glad if this was happening at 4 p.m., you'd be getting the faded version of me, but I'm still awake. Still feels like midday. For all of you or the few of you who joined since about a minute or two ago, I kicked off by asking you this question. What is one of your favorite topics of conversation? And I had you type into the chat. And now, depending on when you join, there's a whole bunch of stuff in the chat. And so what I'd love to do, 2 things. First, anytime I'm on Zoom with a group of people, I wrote a book a few years ago called How to Make Virtual Engagement Easy. And so I like to try to break Zoom, or at least goad or tease to participants that we're going to try to break Zoom. So I'm going to do what I might do with a group of 100 people at Crayola. And in a moment, I'm going to invite you all to unmute at the same time, just for a minute, to say hello in whatever language you prefer. And we'll see if we can absolutely collapse Zoom's ability to process audio. All right. So on the count of 3, I'm going to invite you to unmute and say hello in whatever language you prefer. 3, 2, 1.
Hello.
Welcome.
Okay, this is beautiful. So this is like, I want this to be very much a conversation, a back and forth, Q&A, informal, and the facilitator in me can't help but like lead a couple things and give you all a couple practical nuggets to walk away with in addition to the tools. So one of my favorite books, Priya Parker, who authored The Art of Gathering, shared some research that I'm going to share the informal version of it, which is basically if you can get people to use their larynx in the first 5% of a gathering, they are vastly more likely to use it in the rest of the 95%. Right. And so this idea of connection before content is what all of my work and with organizations is focused around, is building this culture of connection before content, which for me is the most practical tool to increase psychological safety, to whoever said a minute ago that was one of their favorite topics. So as a demo, before I start saying, here's the tool, because I'm like a little bit biased and passionate about the connection toolkit because I made it. What I'd like to do is have you go into the chat, scroll up and find something you're naturally, genuinely curious about. So find something you're naturally, genuinely curious about. And if you would unmute and ask that person a question, rooted in your natural curiosity. And if you're asked a question and you have the ability, you're not like driving in a car or something, go ahead and unmute and just share a response to their question. So finding something you're curious about. And as soon as you've found it, whoever would like to can unmute and just ask that person a question rooted in their curiosity.
Walt, what do you mean by change management with a twist?
Thanks for asking. Well, we've all been through change. From the very beginning, you couldn't crawl, and then you could crawl, and then you could walk, and then you could run, and then you left home to go to school. Everything is change. Our brains are hardwired for change. The human animal is infinitely adaptable at change, and yet people are afraid of change. They will avoid it and fear it. So I help people go back and look at the successes they've had and translate that into the next map that they need to pull up so that they can navigate whatever change they're facing, because we've already got the experience doing it. I mean, we've been 100% successful at change so far. Why ruin that record?
Beautiful. Okay, so Walt, you're already on the spot, but can I put you on the spot just for a minute? Head nod.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. All right. So everybody else that's not Walt, can you just unmute and just popcorn out? It's okay if you speak over each other briefly, it'll sort itself out. What did we learn about Walt? Right. So one quick question was asked, Walt answered. What are some things you learned about Walt? Fire a couple out.
Realistic.
Realistic.
Articulate.
Articulate.
He likes to help people.
Likes to help people.
He's passionate about change management.
Passionate about change management.
Learner focused.
Learner focused. I noticed about halfway through that, Walt, you seem very thoughtful and intentional with your words, right? The way you spoke, like you meant to say those words in that order. It wasn't by happenstance. Well, maybe it was, I don't know. Okay, so we'll pause there. We could probably go on. The further we go, the farther we travel into the land of assumptions, right? But one simple question with one very simple answer in a chat and a follow-up question. And now we have 6 things, and most of those things were actually about who Paul is, not just what he does. And so if you're trying to build culture, build relationships, speed up the relationship to the relationships of trust that are happening, increase psychological safety, you want people to be connecting at who they are as human beings, not just human doings. And so this is what, if you can't tell already, I am wildly passionate about. And I spend all of my time and effort and research on the brain and with organizations about how to smooth that pathway as make it as easy as possible for the folks that are responsible for leading groups. And so this is where product placement, I don't do very many things where I'm actually like Trainer's Warehouse, like, that Trainer's Warehouse sells stuff, tools that you want to use with groups. Most of the time I'm just like leading an awesome workshop and then they have to go figure it out afterward because I don't like selling stuff. So this is frankly a little bit unusual for me to actually be like
I
Vanna
told
White
I told
holding this
Chad
up.
you didn't have to be shy.
Yeah. And here we go. I think I'm blushing.
It's what we do.
So here's my intent. Before I say anything about the toolkit, I have 2 more questions to ask you in the chat that will help me help us have a little bit more focused, personalized discussion. And then I'll give a quick overview of the tools and when I mean quick, like audible 3 times speed. And then I'll leave it up to you to ask questions, share scenarios, doubts, experiences, etc. That you might have had with the tool. Good.
Perfect.
So first of all, context is really important. Context takes up lots of space in our brain. And so can you just type well, I was just going to do title, your title. Let's go title first, whatever your job title is. Can you type that into the chat? And if you want to add your organization, you can, but you don't have to. So at least your job title. And then hit enter. Right. Beautiful. So one thing I think we're really good at when we meet remotely is asking people to contribute in the chat, but sometimes we forget. So I love meeting remotely because everybody can talk at the same time. It's like a really amazing way to involve a lot of perspectives with low risk, which is good for psychological safety. The problem is we forget to remind people to listen. So go ahead and find somebody that might be like you. So just scroll up in the chat and find somebody like, ooh, I think that we might get along if we bumped into each other on the street. So find that one person and they'll just be your like invisible, informal buddy. You won't be paired up with them. I won't ask you to really talk with you. You're just gonna like, as if they type things in the chat, you're just gonna have your antenna, especially looking out for that person. Now I'm gonna take off my second shirt here because we're gonna get serious. Can you now type, now we've got a title and a little bit of context. Can you just answer this question? What is one thing you are intending to achieve at work right now? So what's one thing you're focusing on? What is one thing you're intending to achieve at work right now? Go ahead and type that into the chat. Does retirement count? Yes, it does. ahead and hit enter when you're ready. So you got a student leadership summit coming up, some customer service learning transfer, develop new supervisors, who develop a consultant tool, but I like the retirement idea. Meeting state requirements, developing a connection with a new group of mentors and building a DEI strategy. Beautiful. Okay. So I'm going to be as bold as to say that our time together does not matter at all, unless some of the things that we talk about are connected to some of the things you wrote in the chat. And there's 22 human beings on the call. And in my opinion, you are the most qualified person to decide what's useful. And so my invitation from this moment forward in our little talk here is to ruthlessly steal and reinterpret everything I say and do and apply it to your own context. All right. And so the tools that I'll unpack with you are actually designed to be ruthlessly stolen and reinterpreted and applied into different contexts. Every single day I get a note from somebody that has used this question that I held up earlier. Comes from a deck called We Connect cards that 10 years ago I created one deck of to solve my own problem with no intentions to create a second deck. And now we order them in batches of 20,000 and they ship all over the world, which is pretty cool. But the idea though behind this tool is that it's really flexible. It doesn't matter if you are in a higher ed, corporate trainer role, really policy-driven government situation, or an education where you've got lots of requirements. Like there's all sorts of really flexible ways to use this tool. And I'll give you one example. This was an accidental discovery, but as we were developing the questions, we realized that almost every question in the deck, you can add context to the end of the question and it makes it purpose specific. So you could add, what is one of your favorite topics of conversation at work? What is one of your favorite topics of conversation with your kids? What is one of your favorite topics, right? And so for me, good connection before content is not just an icebreaker that's like go around and share what favorite color M&M what color M&M you'd be, because it doesn't like that makes people typically a little grouchy and gives them hives because it doesn't relate to like, why are we here? The serious, more logically minded folks are like, this is not, what are we doing? And so if you can add and connect your human connection with the purpose of why you're there also, it's like much easier to gain buy-in on this kind of stuff. So We Connect cards, let me see if the top this is where Audible 3x speed demo of the toolkit starts. So the cards are split into 3 categories, and back in a nerdier time, as I was developing these questions, actually wrote a peer-reviewed paper on the development of these specific 60 questions. And so like, I really like these questions. They are specifically designed to accelerate the time that it takes for somebody to have a really good conversation and build a relationship of trust. And so green questions tend to be fun and light. Purple questions we put in to give a hug to the introverts in the room. So they encourage some level of self-reflection. They're the kinds of questions that you might not have an answer to because you've never been asked. And blue questions are a little bit deeper. And so, in my opinion, if you're going to invite people into the right conversations, you got to give them as much choice and autonomy as possible. So pick a color question, choose a question that you want to answer, and pair up with 2 other people in the group and share. Or my favorite exercise, a question swap, which I have actually personally led with well over 100,000 people, is give everybody 1 card, pair up with that person, invite them to ask the question on their card, swap cards when they're done with that conversation, toss their hand in the air, signaling that they're looking for somebody new. And so it's a self-facilitating, self-swapping. Some people have 3 conversations and then they meet their soulmate and stop. Some people have 22 and they're like a little butterfly buzzing around, depending on how much time you let it go for. It works in groups of, I usually don't do a question swap in a group smaller than 12, but I did a question swap a couple years ago, well, before COVID, with 8,000 people at the University of Wisconsin. And so there's like the scale is just like you can just keep going up and up and up and up. Super flexible tool. There's questions on one side and then actions on the back. So the action side was originally placed there 10 years ago because I was working with early high school students in this week-long program, getting them to connect. And if you ask a like late middle schooler, early high schooler to connect, it looks awfully awkward. They're like, what do I do with my hands? They're moving around, they're squirming. And so I just said, what could I put in between those two people to help make that go better? And so the action, you can invite people if you want to, if it's appropriate. You can invite people to do the action or the stretch on the back of their card while they're listening or while they're talking or both. And so it just adds this kinetic element. Also a really fun way to get people to pair up. You can invite people to pair up with people with the same action on the back of their card without showing their card and without talking. So now you got 45 people walking through the room like this, stretching, or somebody's turning their leg or whatever else. And then all the tools and the toolkit itself come with a URL on the back that leads to a bunch of video tutorials where me or somebody else is actually leading the exercise with a group or explaining it. And so you can kind of pick your flavor. So I'll zoom back out into the whole toolkit has 5 main items in it. The WeConnect cards are the first one. And I'm going to pause real quick because I'm on Audible 3 times speed. And Sue, I just want to check in. How are we doing? How are you doing? You want to interject at all?
I think we're good. I already have a few questions for you, but so let's, why don't you finish that and then others probably do as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll plan. If you want to bank questions, we'll drop questions in the chat too, so I can speak to collective curiosity and get as many people's curiosities covered. So Connection Toolkit's got 5 main items. We got the WeConnect cards and explain those. Those are my favorite. I use them the most when I'm traveling around speaking and facilitating. My late co-founder, Will Wise, and I wrote the book Ask Powerful Questions, Create Conversations That Matter, which frankly, much to our surprise, went off and became and still is a bestseller. And the framework in that book, it's just a really practical framework for those of you who are interested in psychological safety. If you're not already in speaker mode or speaker view, this pyramid here, right? I am willing to know you. I see you, I hear you, I get you, and I am with you. If I knew how to make a magic wand that you could just walk up to your peeps and wave it and they could feel and experience all of that, I would put a very hefty price tag on it and say to Trainers Warehouse, do you want to resell this for me? But that magic wand doesn't exist. And so the whole book and the framework that the book is based on is the mindset and tool set and skill set for how do we create a culture where this is common, not rare. Right. And so over here, chapter 1, focus on being really clear about your intent and sharing it with the other one. So there's a ton of really practical tools and ideas in there. It's used right now in organizations a lot to build a kind of leader as coach culture, to just promote in general, like in industries that have lots of change going on. You can't possibly prepare everybody for everything, but you can teach them to ask really good questions and be curious so they're constantly learning. And so it's like the infinite, my favorite way of embedding micro learning in an organization is just teaching them how to ask good questions and rewarding curiosity, because then they're doing their own personalized micro learning all the time, right? So that's the book, Ask Powerful Questions. There's QR codes throughout with video summaries of the chapters. And then my other favorite deck is this deck of We Engage cards. So there's quotes on one side. This is actually my favorite quote in the back here. Everyone you will ever meet knows something you don't, by Bill Nye, the science guy. And so there's quotes on one side and images on the other. And there's an infinite amount of exercise that you can do with this, but most of them, or not most of them, a whole personalized swath of them would fall into this template, which is simply choose a card that represents blank. Choose a card that represents a future you'd like to create, a unique strength. Choose a card that represents something you care about, something you're struggling with right now, a problem you'd like to solve by the end of the week, right? It's amazing how people's brains are able to see a bunch of imagery and connect it to their own real life stuff, which makes it a little bit more sticky and useful for them to talk about. And almost last but not least, all the leaders and educators that I work with, usually they'll come up and say, this is really awesome. Like there's so much stuff. There's hundreds of activities. Like, what's the best one? Like, what's the right answer, Chad? And so the last thing that's in the toolkit is this map, this fold out map. Whoa. That's got two sides. So the first side, the top half that we see in blue, are my 3 absolute favorite exercises to do with the We Connect cards, the question ones. And then the bottom are my 3 favorite exercises to do with the We Engage cards. And if that's not enough, there's there's a QR code on the bottom that leads you to a dozen plus video tutorials and other stuff on the site. So super useful. Like, here's what you do with the cards. You can get it in about 90 seconds. And then on the back, I mentioned this concept of connection before content, created a really thoughtfully designed little video masterclass on the topic. But when I realized I do a lot of my learning via, if I'm doing learning via video, it's like on the couch with my phone in hand, not necessarily like sitting in my office being a good student or something. And so this is the masterclass in QR code form. And so this is, you probably can't read the top here, but it's 9 connection building strategies and activities. And so you pick, it has a little description of what you might want to use one of the 9 for. You zoom in, it demos how I'd facilitate the activity. It walks you through some leadership tips and different variations for remote hybrid contexts as well. Whew. And then the last thing, and then I'm going to shut up and listen to your questions, which I guess will put me in the position of talking more. The last thing on the map is, the last page is a QR code that gives you a free unlimited subscription to Playmio.com, which, if you're not familiar, is a super cool site. It is the largest database of interactive, collaborative online learning activities. So there's 530 activities. I think 300 plus have video tutorials, and it's searchable. So you can say, I'm looking for, can I zoom in on this? Not right now.
You can see it.
Okay. So, so let's say you want a team building exercise and you are a corporate trainer and you've only got 5, or let's say you only got 2 to 5 minutes with pairs. You want to do it. An exertion level, let's say they're kind of grumpy. So let's start off passive, and you can search activities and get like just the right, which actually that's a pretty niche search. You got 2 minutes to do a passive team building exercise. And it'll pull up a whole bunch of exercises that you can choose. Let's see if I can, oh, you know what's funny? This. Load. Okay. So this one's called keyboard. I obviously don't know all 530 of these activities, but when you click on them, it gives you step-by-step instructions, how to play.
What a great resource.
Yeah. There's a good demo for you too, Sue, because you're going to connect with Mark Collard, who's the founder of Playmio, based in Australia. Really brilliant. And we've partnered. We just like each other enough, do similar enough work that we've partnered to just allow the subscription to be included with the toolkit. So, full
Excellent.
stop.
Well done with 5 minutes.
All in one breath.
And we often go overtime, so we're all good. That was great, Chad. Thank you. Want to give folks a chance to ask any questions they might have. I think you answered my second question about where some of the exercises are described, because I think in that roadmap you have a lot there. Yes. I was also wondering, like, if you feel like starting with an easier question is a way to is sort of an important precursor to then going into deeper questions. Like, do you recommend that?
Yeah, I think depending on the group. So you can just separate out the green cards, or say everybody choose a green card if you feel like your group's there. And I'm a big fan of giving people choice and letting them pick their own level of challenge. The Adventure Outdoor Ed world would call this challenge by choice. And so laying out all the cards, I will, even with a group of 1,000 people, will say there are 2 dominant ways you have choice in the types of conversations you're about to have. Number 1, the cards are color coded. Green, fun and light. Blue, a little bit deeper. Purple, encourage some level of self-reflection. Number two, and this is my favorite feature of questions, is that you have 100% choice and autonomy in how you answer any given question. So, for example, if you ask me a really big question, like what is one thing life is teaching you right now, right? I could answer and say, the room is a little warm. I probably need to turn on my fan in the office because I've closed my door and I'm sealed in here. And I could also say, life is teaching me to be really present because my co-founder and co-author, Will Wise, passed away about 2 years ago in November. And so when when November rolls around and that date rolls around, it reminds me that time is really, really precious. And so what I put on my calendar is only what I feel like is going to make a difference in the world. So you get that like same question, but two really different answers. And so by just framing that, front loading that real quick with a group, you've made all questions, all levels of
It gives them
choice and ability.
agency.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Increases autonomy, which even for the grumpiest of people, I'll sometimes give an out. Like, all right, the answer that I gave, like the room's a little warm. Yeah. For all the grumpy people that didn't want to do the thing that they're in the mandated training session or whatever else, this like uncrosses their arms and they're like, okay, I'll play along with your experiment, Chad.
Well, I also like in that exercise where someone can hold up a question if they're looking to connect with somebody. So if you really don't want to go deep, like you can choose that, which is really nice.
Yeah, so if you're not in a blue card kind of mood, you can just duck and cover and go find somebody with a green card to pair up with.
All right, Nora and Walt had questions as well. All
right. I see there's questions in the chat. Nora, why don't you off mute and ask, and then Walt next. And then
you just answered it. If in fact the move around, if they hold up the color, but I would be giving that direction in advance. If you don't want to go to that second level, look only for green people. If you don't want to, or if you're open to, because I can see how it works when you choose a card, but if you do that switch thing with your partner, because that's one of the directions you gave is the two of you exchange and then you switch. What if this guy hands me a purple and I'm going, oh no, I'm not going there. But you kind of also answered it with, I can give a blow off answer. The room's too hot, or I can give a blow off answer if I want to and not go deep. I can stay light and fun, even if you went deep and your question was deep. So I can see the flexibility in this but I think people need to know they have permission to do that. Otherwise, some folks are going to feel like they got tricked. I chose green. Now a purple person's handing me their card, and now I feel tricked because now I have to go deep. I don't want to go deep with these people. I don't know them enough yet.
Yeah, so I will frame. So here's the other thing. There's always the question when you like read an exercise or watch an exercise on in a video. The question always arises for me anyway. Will this work for me? And it's impossible for me to know that answer because I don't know who you'll be doing this with, and I have personally done this with over 100,000 people and it hasn't flopped yet. And I think one of the reasons it hasn't flopped is there's so much agency, there's so much choice that typically, even if they get a blue card, but I really like tuning into, like, you never, as a facilitator in my mind, you never want to trick people or have people even feel remotely tricked. And so, and for me, part of avoiding that is just giving them as much choice as possible within the boundaries and context that you're in. Walt, what you got?
Well, as you're talking, my brain went into instructional design mode and I'm creating curriculum to make use of the cards. Would you recommend using We Connect before we engage?
You can do enough things with both. Let me say it this way. I usually do, but you can do enough things with both that you can actually choose that based on the design. So for example, the other day I was working with, did a keynote with 800 school coordinators in Kentucky, and then I had 200 of them in a breakout afterward. And so as they came into the breakout, I'm a big fan of this concept of an unofficial start, which is begin immediately with purpose and intention, rather than just waiting for people who are late, and rewarding the late people and punishing the early people. And so in the hallway, as they're walking through the conference center, I had a couple hundred We Engage cards spread out all over the floor. And I just was inviting people, hey, welcome. Grab a quote that you really click with right now. which is an exercise called click quotes that I began immediately. As if you haven't already, turn to somebody in a row behind you or in front of you and just share the quote that you had and what about it clicked with you right now. Right. So that would be a perfect unofficial start. Tons of choice. They pick the quote. I'm not making them choose a quote that says like, here's my deepest personal secret. It's like the quotes are overall uplifting, but also realistic. I didn't want to create purely like an affirmation deck. And so there's a good range of quotes, both from a good range of diverse quotes, both from in type of quote and type of author as well. So it's not just a bunch of dead white dudes quotes. That was important to me. And then, yeah, that said, I often use We Engage cards to, if content is heavy, or if there's a lot of content and we're like, okay, we've been in consumption mode quite a while, We Engage cards are a perfect thing to have in the back pocket to pull out and say, okay, woo, full stop. We've been like, there's a lot of stuff rolling around. Can everybody just go find an image that relates to one idea they would like to hang on to a month from now? One idea they'd really like to remember, or a year from now. And you're actually, that's like good learning practice because you're pairing a visual with otherwise perhaps written or verbally shared information. But it also gets people up, their blood flowing a little bit, but not too much, and then back to this learning.
And I think Amy Clymer used the example last time we spoke of finding an image that reflects something that you might want to learn today, or that you could use it as an icebreaker or an intro, or relating a personal experience to the content that you're going to be introducing. So I could see those images being used, either earlier or later in a session as well.
Yeah, there's so one thing to know about the deck when you get it, there is a link on that deck as well. I'll do a bunch of video tutorials, but there's also quick written exercises. So the top 5 cards, it's an exercise called Inspiring Intentions and Directions for how to facilitate it. One called Tools for Trust, Story Swap, Quick Quotes. And then one of my favorites in the why we chose the hexagon shape in particular, which is a bit unique, is this exercise that I call visualizing values. So take an organization. Most organizations have a value of integrity or something like it. And so you write integrity on the back of this, backside of this card is blank. So you write a value on there and you invite people to choose an image that represents a story where they saw integrity show up. Like way more concrete way to talk about a value and culture in an organization. And so, yeah, heaps of really flexible, creative ways to use those.
Awesome. Other questions?
Jody. Jody, this is funny. I talked about this with Sue beforehand. How do we get the fold out map if we have the original connection toolkits and it wasn't included? You can email my team and Heather on my team, hello@weand.me. We'll send you a digital version that has all the QR codes that you can scan. So it won't be, you bought the original kit and it's refreshed. So, if you buy a 2014 car, you can't, they're not going to ship you all the new stuff for the 2020. So we're not going to ship you the kit, but we'll happy to send you a digital version of the physical map.
And if you forget that, just reach out to Trainers Warehouse also, and we can get you in touch with Chad's team.
Yep.
Or get that too. So either way, we'll both have you covered.
All right. Surrounded by customer service. I like it. Let's see. Nora. So full pause. Any other questions about the kit or just about any of the words that I've blabbed out today?
Or ways that you'd like to use it, or questions about that?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll hang on the phone afterwards. Let me formally say thank you all for joining us. Chad, thank you for being here and sharing your ideas, your facilitation, your toolkit, all of the different ways that we can kind of bring this tool to life. I know you have a ton of videos, but having kind of this face-to-face is just, to me, there's nothing like it. So I appreciate your being here.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can invite the optional closing that we chatted about, Sue,
Yeah.
and one thing. So for me, designing an environment for engagement, we don't want to forget the end, because the way that we end here shapes the state that you're in for the next thing you go into. And so if you would like, if it would be beneficial and kind of fun for you, to do a little bit of connection in the chat, if you want to find a link to your LinkedIn profile, we're like all in roughly the same industry and world on this call, or most of us anyway. And so if you'd like to just rapid network with a bunch of people that you happen to share this random, lovely virtual experience with, go get a link to a URL to your LinkedIn page and paste it in the chat. And then you can just click open a bunch of tabs and add people that were here. And then I'll make one, I'll share my LinkedIn as well. And then Sue, if it's okay, just share the YouTube link to my YouTube channel. I believe ideally information should be free and accessible to everybody. So I just pasted a link to my YouTube channel, which I have spent a ton of money and a ton of time giving away stuff for free. So there's 500 plus tutorials there designed for leaders, educators, trainers, facilitators, to help make connection and engagement easy. And so you can take your pick. There.
And we can also distribute the chat thread.
Cool.
If needed. So if you folks don't have a chance to grab all of those LinkedIn links immediately, we got you covered there too.
We'll share my LinkedIn here as well.
Excellent.
And that'll just about do it, I think. When you are ready, so feel free. I don't have like a hard stop at 12:38. So if you have a question that you want to ask in a smaller group, I'll linger around for a couple minutes after the recording. We didn't really talk about that, Sue. If that's okay. And then as the final closing, if you're about to log off, feel free to unmute and say goodbye in whatever language you prefer.
All right.
Go full circle.
Thank you.